Well, good evening. You can say, good evening. I'm glad you're here. I appreciate you coming out tonight. This is the 92nd annual Sam Rotman Christmas concert. Do I look that old? No. But I've been doing this for over 20 years. I come to this wonderful little church every December, and it's at least the 20th concert, and I love coming here and appreciate the opportunity to come. So let me share with you the program's about an hour and 15 minutes, so I know how long we're here, 7:15 or so. There is a tremendous, tremendous reception. They have this amazing table of goodies, Christmas cookie, everything you can imagine. So be sure and stay, because if you like the concert, you'll love the reception. Lots of good sugar. So about an hour and 15 minutes is the program. I play classical music. It's not hymn arrangements, gospel music. It's classical music. I went to a famous school called the Juilliard School of Music in New York City. I have a bachelor's and a master's, and so it's classical. I'm going to introduce the pieces, and then later in the program, I'm going to share music's not the most important thing in my life. And then at the very end, when I finish the last piece by Beethoven, a short work by Beethoven, we're going to sing. I've done this every year. We're going to sing Christmas carols. 4 Christmas carols, 5 Christmas carols, just the first verse. Everybody knows the first verse of every Christmas carol. You all know the first verse of Silent Night, "O come all ye faithful, hark the herald." So I'll play, and we'll have that, and then we'll be dismissed and have the reception afterwards. So the first piece I'm going to play is by Beethoven. Beethoven's my favorite composer. I've done, when he had his 250th anniversary, I did 205 all Beethoven concerts all around the world in celebration of this 250th anniversary of his birth. And so this is an early work by Beethoven. Early Beethoven is very dramatic, very intense. To many people, music was background music. It was something that you had a meal, the Emperor of Austria, or there was a dignitary coming, and so they wanted a little background music. Beethoven says, I don't write background music. My music is the power of the human soul. So his music has a lot of this intensity, dramatic, very shocking in that sense. When he wrote this piece, music changed because nobody thought of music that was this powerful and intense. So it's in 3 parts. The first part is lively, the second part is a little dance, and the third part is very fast. So this is an early work, what's called a sonata by Beethoven. Oh, you're enthusiastic. I'll play till midnight. No, that's all right. Not really, not really. Well, next time I'll play you two pieces by Chopin. So Chopin is Polish. The unique thing about Chopin is that he's the only composer who wrote just for the piano. So Beethoven wrote for violin. He wrote for orchestra. He wrote for singers. He wrote for piano. He wrote for cello. But Chopin only wrote piano music. So if you're going to ever play the piano, you better like Chopin. I've never met a pianist who didn't like Chopin. I was in Poland about 3 months ago, and every time I've been there 5 times. Every time I go there, I play Chopin. I play lots of Chopin because that's their heart of their music. Poland was trying to get their independence from Prussia, not Russia, but Prussia. Prussia was a part of Bohemia, a part actually of Germany. It was the Prussian Empire. And they were in a struggle for it. And so Chopin wrote these 2 pieces called the Tragic and the Military Polonaise. The Tragic and the Military Polonaise. The tragic because of their struggle for the Polish people, for their independence, and the military, the nationalistic, to sort of invigorate them, encourage them that this was being written. A Polonaise is a national dance. It's a specific dance of Poland, of the Polish people. It's a folk dance. Has a unique rhythm. The rhythm is bum, 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 bum. And you'll hear it somewhat in the first, but you'll hear it more obviously in the second. Also in the second, you'll hear a drum roll. I actually call the piece more nationalistic than military, but at one point you'll hear this drum roll. So this was this imagery of Chopin writing this. Chopin wrote these 2 pieces within 2 days of each other. And when he had it published, they were published exactly at the same time. So when you publish music in classical music, it began actually with Beethoven. He was the first composer to be extensively published because he was so popular. It's what's called an opus numbering system. The opus is a Latin word which means work number. So if something is opus 100 and you have opus 40 was written long before 100 because in between 40 and 100 are another 60 pieces that have been published. So when Chopin had this published, he called it opus 40 number 1 and 2. He didn't give it an individual number, like this is opus 40 and this is opus 41, because opus 40 to 41 could have been 6 months later or a year later. But Chopin said, no, I wrote them at the same time. They're published opus 40, number 1, and number 2. 40, number 1, 40, number 2. So it just shows the pouring of the emotion of this piece and the relation to the Polish people of their struggle for their independence. So this is the tragic, very sad. You'll hear this in the beginning, very in the bass, this sadness, and then military, bombastic by Chopin. I turned 75 in October, and playing that piece is like a 2-hour workout at the gym. I can tell you that. That piece was a lot easier when I was 55. I'm sweating up here, and there's air conditioning going on and everything, and that's an intense piece. Intense piece. Well, someone asked me tonight, are you going to play the cathedral piece? And that's interesting because I've played this wonderful piece by Debussy. So I said, okay, for you, I'll do the cathedral piece. But so the next two pieces are by Claude Debussy. He wrote a famous piece called Clair de Lune. I'm not playing it tonight. I can't play it at every concert. It's on my CD of Debussy, The Light of the Moon. But these are two pieces by Debussy. The first is the cathedral piece. I see the person's here, so that's good. And it's based on a French poem. You're on the coast of France, and it's very foggy. You'll hear that. After 30 seconds, you're going to hear 3 soft bells. So listen for that. 30 seconds, 3 bells. The water starts moving, the bells get louder, the water moves, the bells get louder, and then out of the water comes this gigantic Gothic European cathedral. So, you know, in Europe, it took them 200 years to build a church, so it gets pretty intense. And you'll know when it comes up. You'll know. All the bells are ringing. It's blasting. And also the piano starts rising off the floor, but the water starts moving again, and then the whole cathedral sinks back into the water. That's why it's called the Sunken Cathedral. The French title is called La Cathédrale, the cathedral. That's French for cathedral. La Cathédrale engloutie. La Cathédrale engloutie. Engloutie means engulfed, and we translate it sunken. The fog returns, you hear 2 soft bells, and the piece ends. The next piece is about, all you need to know, it's about a juggler. A juggler. There was a man named Edward Levine who was purported and advertised as the greatest juggler in the world. That was his advertisement. He came to Paris, performed in Paris, and Debussy saw him perform in 1905. And he wrote this piece about his act. It starts off with a trumpet call, pa-pa-pa-pam, 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 announcing him. He walks out very sheepishly. He throws a pin way in the air, and Debussy said the French audience gasped, and he writes a mistake. It sounds like a sour note in the piano, and then as the pin's going to hit the ground, he grabbed it because he was the world's greatest juggler. It's a very comical piece, humorous piece, very entertaining. There's some jazz in the piece because when Edward Levine came to Paris, he brought a jazz band from New Orleans. So he remembers this background of jazz accompanying this act. Very comical, very humorous. Debussy wrote in his diary that the French audience roared with laughter at the antics of Mr. Levine, but were truly in awe of him as he is the world's greatest juggler. Isn't that a great quote? The people are just humorous, laughing, but they were in, this guy is the greatest juggler. So the cathedral and the juggler by Claude Debussy. Thank you. Well, next I'm going to play two pieces for you that I call gems. Gem is not in the title, but I discovered these pieces during COVID. I had 54 concerts postponed in COVID, and I made up 49 of the 54. So I had a lot of time. I didn't have concerts for about 7 months, and so I practiced a lot, and I found these two pieces. The first piece is called The Music Box. It's written by a Russian composer named Lyadov. He's not very well known, although he wrote a few very wonderful pieces. And it sounds just like a music box. Now, you know what a music box is. You wind it up, right? And the music box, and on top of it is a little ballerina. She goes around, right? I know I don't look like a ballerina, so. She has her little tutu on and her little beautiful chiffon outfit, you know. And at the end of the piece, what happens at the music box? It unwinds. And I'm telling you, it's absolute magic for the last 40 seconds of this piece. I don't try to breathe while I'm playing it. The way he wrote out, the genius of this man writing out this slowing and retarding and extinguishing of the pin, the ribbon inside that keeps it going is magical. The second piece is called A French Dance by a French composer named Chabrier. He's not as famous as other composers, but I like to play this piece because it's a contrast to the delicate music box. You know, it's very delicate, and then now this French dance, very boisterous, very outgoing. So I call them my gems because I didn't know about these pieces. I only know of one other pianist that plays the music box, so it's not very well known, but I discovered it during COVID, and so there are little gems. The Music Box and the French Dance by Lyadov, the Russian composer, Chabrier, the French composer. Well, could you hear the music box expire? It's unbelievable how he writes that all out delicately. The rest, the touch. I've spent hours on those 40 seconds, I can tell you that. It's a magical moment. It's magic. Well, before I play a last big piece by Beethoven, I'd like to share a little bit about myself, as I have the other times I was here. My story begins with my parents. My father was born in Eastern Europe in a country called Romania. My mother was born in Eastern Europe. He was born there in 1905. My mother was born in Eastern Europe. At that time, the country was called Czechoslovakia. She was born there in 1915. So my parents were 10 years difference in age. And they were both very religious Orthodox Jews. So the Orthodox Jews are the strictest Jews that adhere to the Jewish faith. They want to follow all the laws that God gave to the Jewish people through Moses in what we refer to, Jewish people refer to as the Torah. The Torah are the first 5 books of Moses. And that's where all of Jewish theology and Jewish practice come from, the Torah. My parents left Europe in 1940. My father was 35, my mother was 25. And they left Europe because of one person, and his name was Adolf Hitler. If my parents stayed in Europe, I can tell you with 1,000% guaranteed, they both would have been murdered. They would have been sent to a concentration camp and immediately killed, or sent to a labor camp. And people don't know this, but if you went to a labor camp and they worked you 18 hours a day, once you ever got sick, they killed you. There was no time for you to get well. So my parents, like a lot of Jews, had to get out of Europe. 11 months after my father left Romania, the Nazis came to his town. They came to their house. Immediately, they entered the house and murdered his parents, my grandparents, 1941. He had a sister. They took her to a concentration camp and never heard from again. So like a lot of Jews, they ended up in South America. There were a few countries that had heard what was happening to Jews in Europe, and they said if they can get here, they would open up an immigration for Jews who were fleeing the Holocaust. And my parents ended up in a small country right on the equator called Ecuador. And they ended up in the capital called Quito, Ecuador, from 1940 to 1950. My brother was born there. My sister was born there. In the spring of 1950, my mother was pregnant with me. And so my father wanted to bring his family to the United States. He filled out all this paperwork. He got permission. Now, of course, these are years after the war. The war had ended in 1945. He got permission. They came through New York City, and I was born 5 months later in October of 1950. And as you can imagine, I was raised in a very, very, very religious Jewish home. My grandparents died for being Jewish. My parents suffered for being Jewish, and I was instilled with all my Jewish heritage. My parents sent me to public school during the day, and then I went to school in the synagogue, and it was called Hebrew school. So in Hebrew school, you learned Hebrew, and you learned all about being Jewish, and you learned literally hundreds of prayers. This was every day from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. after school. I was driven to the synagogue for my rigorous training in Hebrew school. I went there 5 days a week for 8 years. This was a very, very important part of my life. I started when I was 8 years old until I was 16. So all those formidable years of growing up, this had a very big impact upon me. I remember I'd wake up in the morning, pray for a half an hour in Hebrew. All my friends were Jewish. All my relatives were Jewish. I like to share this. Don't laugh because it's not funny, but this showed the seriousness of this. If you entered this track of studying in the synagogue, of your rigorous training of Hebrew school, this was not a 2-week course on how to be a better Jew. This was a commitment for your life. This is how you would live for your life as a religious Jew committed to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I would wake up in the morning, pray for half an hour in Hebrew, and then something happened and I was 12 years old. And again, don't laugh because it was not funny at the time. But I realized I had developed a very foul mouth. I could curse very easily. I could lie to my teachers. Not a lot, but enough. I could lie to my parents. Not a lot, but enough. I was very religious in the synagogue. 5 days a week. In fact, it was 7 days a week because we were in synagogue on the Sabbath, and then I went to school on the Sunday. But the Hebrew school was Monday through Friday. And here I was praying, and I realized it was easy to be religious. And then an hour later, I'm swearing and cursing and lying, and that was easy. Look, it was easy for me to be religious when I had to, and easy for me to be religious when I had to, and easy for me to be irreligious when I wanted to. I was good at both. It's sad that you could fake both. Can I say that? I don't say that disparagingly. Then when I was 17, I went to Juilliard. I have 2 degrees. I was there for 5 years, and I got a bachelor's and a master's in piano. And there I met 3 students who called themselves born-again Christians. Well, I had no idea what that meant. I never heard that. But there was something about these students. Every time I saw them alone, one was having lunch in the cafeteria. One was taking a break from practicing. Every time I saw them individually, they were always reading the Bible. The Bible. This is not a school of religion. It's a school of music. These were Juilliard students. These were talented musicians. And they were very highly respected in the school for their talent. And when they got together, all they did was talk about the Bible. And specifically, always talking about Jesus. Jesus did this. And Jesus said this. And why did Jesus say this? And what did it mean when Jesus did this? They never mentioned church. I had no idea about church. They never said a word about a church. They never mentioned the C word, which is called Christianity. It was always about this Jesus. Jesus and Jesus and Jesus. In Hebrew, Yeshua. Yeshua. Well, they heard I was a religious Jew. And so they asked me 2 questions. They approached me. They talked to me because I was a religious Jew. They asked me if I ever thought about reading the New Testament. There's the Old Testament, the history of the Jews. Then there's the New Testament. And I told them, nope. I was told the New Testament was not a Jewish book. It was not for the Jews. You'd never find a New Testament in our home. I had no idea what was in it. I never saw one. I never read one. I never touched one. No concept of one word in this book. They asked me if I thought, well, could Jesus be the Jewish Messiah? The Jews are waiting for the Messiah. In Hebrew, the word is Mashiach. Mashiach. I said, Jesus is not the salvation for Jewish people. But again, I was very moral. I was very religious. Listen, I didn't want to do anything to hurt my parents. My parents literally almost died for me. They sacrificed for me to escape the Nazis, to come to America, sacrificing. I didn't want to shame them. So I never drank alcohol. To this day, I still don't know what a beer tastes like, what alcohol tastes like. So I was never drunk. And I'll tell you my thinking. I said, if I don't drink, I won't get drunk. And if I don't get drunk, I won't do something stupid and shame my parents. That was my thinking. Never took drugs. Now, some of you relate to this. I lived in New York City, Manhattan, from 1968 to 1973. That was the height of the Vietnam War, and that was the height of the group called the hippies. You know what the hippies were all about? All the drugs you want, all the sex you want, and you'll find happiness. Well, I'll tell you this. Where I lived in New York City, 71st Street and Broadway, there were drugs on every corner. There were drugs all over New York City. You wanted drugs? Not what drugs you wanted, it's how much drugs you wanted. There were drugs everywhere. I never took it. Never had sex before marriage. So listen, even though I was so moral on the outside, no sex, no drugs, no drinking, my friend, I'm going to tell you, I was very, very, very immoral. Immoral. You know where? Right here. Listen to me, please. I knew that I was not on the inside the way I could appear on the outside. I could do many, many Jewish things, but it never affected me on the inside. I was very moral. I was very religious, but not changed. I was the same foul-mouthed, dirty-minded, self-centered, egotistical person at 20 years old, 18 years old, 16, 14. Nothing changed about me except I was getting older. I had the same issues, the same problems, the same sins. So I made a big decision. I said, well, if I want to know about this person, Jesus Christ, I'm going to read this book, the New Testament. And that was a big step for a Jew to read the New Testament. And I didn't want to talk to a rabbi, a Jewish rabbi, a priest, Catholic priest, minister, Protestant. No one's going to tell me what I'm reading. I'm going to read this book myself. Now, when I was at Juilliard, I used to practice for 10 hours a day. Now, let me tell you, that's not a lie or an exaggeration. I did not sit at the piano for 9 hours and 45 minutes. I sat every day at the piano. I never left a day at Juilliard that I did not sit and practice for 10 full hours a day. And when I started to read the New Testament, my whole life came to a stop. I was absolutely shocked when I read this book. These friends gave me a little pocket New Testament, you know, a little thing you can just put in your pocket. They said, well, Sam, if you read this book, I had no intention to, if you read it, start in this book called The Gospel of John. Okay, never heard of it. Opened the book, looked at it. Wow, there it is, sure enough, The Gospel of John. So I'm going to quote to you what I read. Here was a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the light of the world. Are you kidding me? You know, as a religious Jew, the first thing that came to my mind was the first book of the Bible, in Hebrew, Bereshis, the beginning. And in the first few verses, God says, let there be light. And every Jew is taught that God is light. Every synagogue in the world, every synagogue has a symbol of what is called the eternal light. The light's not God, it's the reality of God. Every Jewish holiday, you light the Sabbath candles, the first thing. Passover, you light a candle, the first thing. What? It's the reality of the Almighty who is light. And now this man says, I'm the light. Here's a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the bread of life. Here's a man, Jesus, who said of himself, nobody comes to God except through me. What? Nobody? What did you say? Here's a man who said, if you have him, Jesus, the Son of God, you have life. If you don't have Jesus, the Son of God, you don't have life. Listen to these words, he said. I am the vine and you are the branches. If without me, you can do nothing. What? Without God, I can do nothing. Sam, listen to me. Listen. Without me, you can do nothing. Sam, you want to know God? You want to obey God? You want to serve God? You know me. You obey me. You serve me. Jesus said, you believe in God, you believe also in me. The same devotion, the same adoration you give to Adonai, Elohim, El Shaddai, the Almighty God, you give to me. Well, let me tell you something. Don't laugh. I said, this man's an idiot. Listen. You know who Moses is? Moses never said he was the light of the world. Abraham, the father of the Jews. Every Jewish prayer begins with Abraham. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, the King of the universe, the God of Abraham, Elohei Avraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. But let me say something on the side here. I didn't realize, can I say this very honestly, that Jesus was Jewish. Isn't he a Christian? Isn't Jesus the big poobah of Christians? And you know, he had these followers. And you know who they were? They were all Jewish. These followers of his were all Jewish. And every book in the New Testament, there are 39 books. 37 of them were written by Jews. Jews wrote the New Testament. And 99% of what Jesus said and did was among Jews and for the Jews and reaching and declaring he was the Messiah to the Jews. And the first 10 words of the New Testament, the first verse of Matthew 1:1 says, announcing the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of David the son of Abraham. Let me tell you something. I studied Judaism all my life, and you don't get more Jewish than King David and Father Abraham. I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm only saying they don't say it's a Jewish book. It's the most Jewish book that was ever written. It's the most Jewish book about the greatest Jew, whose followers were Jews, whose writers were Jews, and everything he did was to Jews. Well, but I was saying, this was, I was completely blown away. And I said, I'm going to throw away this book. I said, I'm going to throw it away. I'm going to go practice. And at that moment, I said to myself, Sam, if this person, Jesus, Yeshua, if he is who he says he is, who are you, Jesus? You want to know who I am, Sam? I'm the light of the world. And if you don't believe it, I'm still the light of the world. And if nobody believed it, I'm still the light of the world. If he is who he says he is, I may be making the biggest mistake of my life throwing this book away. And then Jesus said, he came for sinners. I was not a sinner, let me tell you. I was very moral. I was very religious. I spent my whole life looking good for God. I was on God's side. But he came to bring us forgiveness, and he said he came to give us a new heart, a new life, a new birth. He called it a spiritual heart, a spiritual birth, a spiritual life. You know, I've played concerts in 62 countries. I think I've played in almost every country in Asia except North Korea. All through Europe, parts of Africa. I've been to Cuba twice. I've given 28 concerts in communist Cuba. And you know why I was invited to Cuba? Because they wanted to hear classical music for the culture of the people. And I said, I'll play the concert, but I give my story about my faith. And they agreed. In 28 concerts, I gave 28 testimonies, as long as I did it in the hall and not on the outside. And let me tell you what I've learned. My friend, I don't care if your skin color is orange or blue or purple or green or yellow or black or white. I don't care if you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're an independent, you're a Communist Party, Socialist Party, Labor Party. I don't care what language you speak, what culture you're from, because this is the reality in the world. The reality in the world is that everybody's good at hiding things. Everybody's good at hiding things. You know what's the first thing man did when he disobeyed God? He hid. He hid from God. And God had to say, where are you? Do you realize that the kernel of every news article, everything on CNN or Fox or the kernel of every news bulletin is who is hiding what? Who is hiding? You can hide things from your husband, your wife, your friends, your parents, your children, your boss at work. But my friend, nobody hides anything from this Messiah, Jesus. In fact, he said that he will reveal everything we've ever done and disclose the motive of our hearts. And even though I was so moral and religious, please listen to me, I thought I was clever enough with my tongue and crafty enough with my mind that I thought I could hide things from people and God. And on May 21st, 1971, 54 years ago, 119 West 71st Street, apartment 4B, for the first time, I acknowledged and prayed to Jesus Christ. And I'm going to tell you what I said. My name is Sam Rotman. My name is Sam Rotman. And Jesus, the Messiah, I want you to come and take over my life. It's very simple. I want you to tell me what to do, and I will not tell you what to do. I told him the lies I said, and there were a lot of them. I told him the curse words I said. There were a lot of them. I told the immoral thoughts I had. There were a lot of them. I didn't hide anything from him, and I made no excuses. You know, you don't need to hide anything from him because you're not hiding anything. It was a long prayer. I finished praying. I opened up my eyes, and instantly, in a billionth of a second, I knew immediately that Jesus Christ, my Messiah, changed me on the inside. I'm telling you, immediately. I was shocked I stopped cursing. Completely cleaned my mouth. And I remember about 5 minutes later, I couldn't form a curse word with my lips if I wanted to. I had a dirty, filthy mind, and instantly he cleaned it and changed it. 54 years ago. 54 years ago. clean my mouth 54 years ago. I thanked him and thanked him and thanked him. And the next morning I got to Juilliard and I went to every practice room and told every Jewish friend of mine, I've been transformed by the Messiah, and his name is Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. I've played over 3,400 concerts. And I can tell you that all of my concerts are nothing. You know how much nothing is? Nothing compared to having Jesus Christ. The greatest thing I ever did in my life, the most important thing I ever did in my life, was giving my life to Jesus Christ. Music's not the most important thing in my life. Jesus is big. Listen, my friend, only Jesus Christ can transform your life, period. Listen, your wife can't change you. Your husband can't change you. Your children can't change you. Your parents can't change you. The church cannot change you. The synagogue, the mosque cannot change you. The government cannot change you. And let me tell you something. Get this. You cannot change you. You know who the hardest person to live with is? Yourself. But this is the miracle in the world. The reality is everyone's good at hiding things. The miracle is that Jesus Christ actually changes a human heart. That is mind-boggling. And he's done it to hundreds of millions of people who have come to him. And I'm one of them, little me. You know I was Jewish? I was born Jewish. Think of it. If I was born in Egypt, you know what I would be? A Muslim. And you would too. If you were born in Egypt, you would be a Muslim today. If you were born in India where I've done concerts, you'd be a Hindu. In Thailand, a Buddhist. It's not a religion, my friend, it's a person. The central person of human history. Salvation is not what you will do for Jesus Christ. Salvation is what Jesus Christ has done for you. And I play the piano for him. He gave me the ears to hear the music, fingers to play the music, mind to learn the music, heart to love the music. You know that Jesus has never missed one of my concerts. You know that? 2 people have never missed my concerts. I know it sounds very cute, but it's very real. He's never missed one of my concerts. And every time I give a concert in a church, a big hall in Europe, or with an orchestra, he's in the front row. I mean it. And every time I sit down to play, he says, Sam, I'm looking forward to hearing you play for me this evening. My friend, listen. If I could look into your eyes, if I was 4 inches from your nose, each one of you, I would tell you with every fiber of my being, listen, it is worth living for this Messiah, Jesus Christ. This is not a joke. He's not a curse word. He's not hocus pocus. He's not even a nice Christmas story. He is the life of life. Don't let anything become an excuse to keep you from the amazing life there is in Jesus Christ. Listen, my friend, I had a million excuses. My family for millennium were Orthodox Jews. I had a million excuses. And you can say like I did. Tonight, when you go to bed, right here, tell him your name. My name, Jesus, my name. And I want you to take over my life, and he will. I want you to forgive me, and he will. I want you to be with me and help me and guide me. My friend, he will. He will. He will. And you do that, my friend, you'll experience the salvation of your soul. You know what you'll see in every synagogue in the world? Reformed, Orthodox, Conservative, Chabad. You'll always see the same thing in every synagogue. You know what? I'm not saying disparagingly. You know what you'll see? The 10 Commandments. In every, the law that God gave to the Jewish people. You know what's the first thing you see when you walk into a church? You know what I call it? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. I know it's called a cross. But you know what that's a symbol of? God's forgiveness. Because that's where God forgave you. And every time you see a cross, someone's wearing a cross, you're driving and there's a cross, God's telling you, come to me because I've made a way to forgive you. To start a whole new life. A whole new life. A whole new life. You have the 10 Commandments, and then you have the new life in the Messiah, Jesus. Music gives me a lot of happiness, but not one note of music will change me. I'll play 40,000 notes a night. 40,000. Not one note will change me. He changed me, gave me a new life. It's worth living for him. Well, we'll be done here in 5 minutes. I'll play the last piece very fast. No, that's not true. This is by Beethoven. It's a very famous piece of his. You've all heard this piece. It's called the Turkish March. Beethoven wrote this piece, and then years later he wrote this melody, this march, and then years later he wrote these sets of variations. So you'll hear this march that you've all heard, and then you'll hear these bits of variations that are sort of developing the march, and at the end you'll hear the march again. So this is the last piece, the Turkish March by Beethoven. Thank you. Well, if you don't mind, since it's the season, I thought we'd end with singing some Christmas carols. It's just going to be 1 minute because we're just doing the first verse. So why don't we sing together? I have a list here of a few of them. Oh, come all ye faithful. Let me just share very briefly. I have some recordings in the lobby here. We have, of course, a reception here. One recording I have is all Beethoven. My favorite recording has 5 major works by Beethoven, including the Moonlight Sonata, the Pathétique. These are monumental works of his. Then there's a recording of Debussy, 16 pieces by Debussy. It has Clair de Lune on it. You listen to it and all the stress goes out of you. You'll be a puddle of water in the living room. Then there's a recording of 6 composers: Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Chopin, Debussy, Rachmaninoff. It's a little of a variety. And then there's a DVD of my whole story. It's what you heard today. It's a documentary, so you watch it. It's me speaking a lot and playing. The recordings are $15 each. And then there's a book that is my whole story. A lady heard my story in Washington State a number of years ago. I think I had the books last year. And she owns a publishing company. She publishes not the whole Bible, but books of the Bible. And so she published together. She heard me give 8 concerts and wrote all my notes down of my story. And she published the Gospel of John. That's what brought me to the Messiah, to Jesus, with the Christian testimony of Sam Rotman. She's published and printed probably 50,000 of these copies, and she gives them to me for free. So they're free. If you want my story, take 20 of them. Take 30 of them. I'm telling you, they're free. They're free. I'm free, but not cheap. But they're free. No, I'm just sharing that with you. She sends them to me. She pays all the postage, everything. She's been doing this for many, many years. She sends them all around the country when I have a tour. I'm going to California. She already sent 900 of them to California for the concerts I have there. And so they're free. I have to charge for the CDs because I pay royalties on it and things. But when you buy a CD, the autograph is free. And I always like to share this. 20 years ago, I gave a concert in Green Valley, Arizona, south of Tucson. And that night I said, tonight, the autograph is $15 and the CD is free. And a man came up to me afterwards and said, I like a CD with no autograph. I won't tell you what I said. But I enjoy coming here. Thank you for what a crowd coming out tonight. And I'll be in the lobby. Take books. I'm saying to you, take books. If you want a CD, I'll be there to autograph them. If you want to look at them and purchase them, and then I'll come and join you at the reception. So stay for the reception. Please stay. There is a lot of food there for 3 times the crowd, but there's a lot of good things. So come on up, Steve, and then I'll play for the offering, and hope it was a blessing. Thank you.